After reviewing the video you're about to watch, I decided that there was some questions that needed to be answered, like what is draw steel? But to answer that, first we have to answer who is Matthew Colville. Matthew Colville is a game designer and writer based in the LA area. He knows a lot of people from Critical Role, and he's very connected with artists and creatives in the design space. And when 5th edition started getting popular, he made a YouTube channel on how to be a dungeon master. And he was really good at teaching people that you can be a dungeon master. And he kind of blew up, and his channel grew and grew and grew. A lot of people liked his content, and he transferred that into starting his own game design company rather than writing for video games. He transferred into starting his own company with a $4.5 million backer kit to start this RPG, Draw Steel, based off of Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition. And to sum it up, I feel like this is just Dungeons and Dragons, but they threw out all the rules that you already throw out. Like, in my experience playing Dungeons and Dragons, no player wants to track XP, track weight, track rations, track torches. They don't want to do that stuff. Like, that's boring to a lot of D&D players. Ever since I got into the hobby, nobody's wanted to play the game using all of the rules. This system basically throws out all the rules that people already throw out. And then it kind of amplifies and puts more rules in there because they have more page space for stuff that people actually want to do, like negotiate with NPCs and do downtime activities and like craft magic items and research stuff and work on their character backstory. And it's a very elegant designed system, handcrafted for the people who play these types of games. There's no weird stuff from 60 years ago now that's still in those Dungeons and Dragons books that nobody actually uses or wants to use at the table. In my experience, nobody's using half of the book, and so they're just wasting page count, and you have to thumb through the book or the PDF or whatever and skip over a bunch of stuff you're not using, and it's just not very elegant. And this is so that's Matthew Colville. That's Straw Steel. Why do you need a setting? Why do you need an adventure? What's the difference? Well, the setting is kind of like the backdrop, right? That's the world that the game takes place in. And if you go back and look at the D&D campaign settings all the way back to 1977, you have Blackmoor, which people don't talk about a lot, but people do talk about Greyhawk, Ravenloft, Dragonlance. I've heard of all these. I've not heard of some of them. Forgotten Realms, which is the one that they use now, is the main one, is Forgotten Realms. I really like Ravenloft personally, but that's dark fantasy me. I would really like to try Planescape because I think that's like the sci-fi one. Do like a Planescape Ravenloft mixture, and then you have something just for me. I don't know why Diablo 2's on here. Is that, did they do something? Is that a what? Why is that on here? Why is it? Is that a D&D setting? Diablo 2 Sanctuary? That would be really fun. That would be really fun. I'm sure maybe they did do that. That sounds really fun. Anyways, this, you need this because this is like, who are the gods? What do the people in the world believe? Like, what kind of stories can you tell? It's going to be based on the setting. And for the adventure, well, this is basically something pre-written for the referee or the dungeon master or the director, the non-player character that's leading the people on the story. They need to have the adventure ready so that they can lay it out and lead people on it. And a lot of them are, here's the 5th edition ones for Dungeons and Dragons. Lost Mine of Phandelver, 2014 came out. Curse of Strahd, they launched one from that old setting, 2016. And this is going to be like the specific story that takes place in one of the settings. So a lot of these are probably taking place in the most popular setting in the Forgotten Realms, but something like Curse of Strahd takes place in the Ravenloft setting. Yeah, this is basically, the story told within the setting. So you kind of need both, right? So when I'm designing my setting, I'm designing the adventure alongside it so that the adventure fits inside the setting well. And I thought that's about all the pre-explanation you guys need. On to the video! Welcome to the first Forging the Game video, everyone. We are making our own setting and adventure module at the same time, kind of a two for one for draw steel. And I'm just gonna kind of go over like where I started and where I'm at, and I've been doing this for a couple weeks now in my spare time, and kind of what got me to start doing this. Well, first off, I got accepted into a group to play test the Codex, which is Draw Steel's virtual tabletop, and I was really impressed with it, and it really got my creative juices flowing. And I wasn't super familiar with the Draw Steel rules or the setting that they have. I think it's called Orden, is Matt Colville's world. And so it's just a lot easier for me. If I'm going to spend all the time reading somebody else's setting, I can just be creative and create my own. But it's actually turned out to be quite a tall order, and that's okay. I don't mind it, but it is taking some time. So my game is set for 2 months out, about from around the time I'm recording this, and I'm just chipping away at it over time. So I know that my favorite setting is dark fantasy. So I wanted to make the setting a little darker, a little like grim dark. And when you look at fantasy settings in role playing games like that, there's always like bad stuff that the dungeon master, or in this case the director, is doing to the players, like cursing them, giving them ailments and stuff. And I want the world to feel dangerous, but I don't want to feel like the bad guy. So I'm having to get all of this in the world so that I don't have to like make the setting hard while I play the adventure. I don't want the adventure, me running the adventure, to be the thing that where I'm setting up the fantasy in the world. That should already all like be written down and stuff. So I know there was some things I wanted to do. I also wanted some sci-fi themes because Draw Steel has some races like the Time Raiders, and to a lesser extent, I think the Miminex, which are kind of like spacey. They have like, what is their world called? The Timescape, right? It's like part of their setting. And it's basically sci-fi. So I know I always loved Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Egyptian theme, so I know I wanted to have a part in the desert with tombs and mummies and all kinds of cool stuff that could happen here. I knew I wanted sci-fi, and I've never really played in a game that had politics, and I've never ran a game that had much politics. And Draw Steel has a good opening in the rules for that sort of thing. So I knew I wanted to have politics in the setting and the adventure. And espionage. There's I think that goes hand in hand with politics, is gathering information so you can make good decisions. I know I wanted to have like a good starting, middle, and end to the story, so I set it up in acts with a finale. So this is just 10 games, 10 3-hour sessions. That seems doable, not crazy, and it seems like, not super long to where you don't get to the end of the adventure before life breaks your group up. Two people get in a fight, or somebody's got work, or something, somebody's missing out, on a session here or there. And so it's probably going to take, add 25 to 50% long onto this, right? We're already in like a 10-week, playing once a week. It's already 10 weeks. It's probably going to take, 12 or 15 weeks to actually finish. Well, where do I start? Well, we start building the world out all the way back with like the creation myths of the world. So I started just brainstorming off of like everyone's views that there's a higher dimension. And I was like, okay, well, what if gods are four-dimensional beings that exist all around us like spirits? That's just an idea. And then like the matter of the world is the 3D lower image of them. So like very very Christian, that the gods created us in their image, right? And then I was like, okay, well, what about these races? Where do these races fit in? I was like, well, I just ended up pulling a lot from Christianity and Catholicism and the Judeo-Christian myths, because that's what I know best. Growing up in America, it's the most prevalent. So I went with, what are some of the first peoples? Well, I wanted to separate out kind of like scientific way. I didn't want humans just to be like the main characters. I wanted it like all the races to have some equal amount of involvement in the world from like a third person perspective. So I started off with just saying that the dwarves are the people of the earth. They're the first people. The world, which I ended up calling Varith, which I don't think I've even written down. this is like their homeland, whereas the high elves are sky people. They literally live in floating cities that orbit around in like spaceships, and like they're actually like astral travelers, and they're highly evolved. They're basically aliens. Right. But they still have the look of your typical high elf look. And then the devils, they literally live inside the earth, just like the Judeo-Christian myth. They live under the crust of the earth where lava comes from. And dragon knights, I ended up with saying I think dragon knights are just cursed. They're just going to be cursed humans that, well, they probably, made a deal or, stumbled upon some sort of interaction with the Titans, which are, the gods of the elements. Something like a draconic curse or something. Like the dragon knights are not born like these crazy races like devils and dragon knights aren't they don't reproduce, right? A thing happened and now they exist. And when they all die, they'll all be gone, right? It's not like these people cannot reproduce like normal. The woad elves, I was just trying to like this is very really rough where I have them all written right here. I was just like, oh, they're people of nature. They're the elves that decided, the high elves that decided to live on the planet, and then their bodies adapted, right? They're just adapted high elves. And then the Hakan are like the giant people in the setting, and I wanted to connect these guys directly to the Titans, whereas like the god that created Varith, the world, needs protectors for its world. So it created the Titans, basically like biome specific, elementally infused super creatures. And the Hakan are the caretakers of the Titans, and the Titans like they're not like slaves, but they have a duty to protect the world akin to the Titans role. They're connected on that level. Maybe I need to flesh that out probably a little bit more, but nobody's playing a Hakan in my first game, so we got time for that. Humans have no god, no divine connections, because they were made by the high elves. This is where it gets sci-fi. I was like, okay, we have this cool sci-fi race. Why don't we just say that humans were not created in a god's image? Humans weren't even supposed to be. The humans were actually just literally DNA splicing of high elves with animal life as like a slave race. And I put here that they can't be conduits, but I don't think I'm actually going to enforce that they can't be conduits, because it's pretty rough on players when they are like, oh, I want to play human conduit, and you're like, not in my setting. And I was like, okay. But I really like the ancient aliens theory that aliens came down and they DNA spliced their DNA with monkeys, and then that's how humans were made. That we didn't evolve. We were created in our own image by an alien race, and that's literally I just steal the stuff you like, put it in your game, right? So I thought that was really cool. So I just put it in the game. Humans were made by high elves, splicing their DNA with the creatures of the land, and it was for a slave race, so that they had a race that would worship them and do their bidding and stuff. The ancient alien theory is that like humans were meant to mine gold for the aliens for their electronics and stuff. That very well could be the case, or it could be something else. Now, I didn't really know what a Miminek was. It's like a plane of order being, and I'm like, well, we don't really have a plane of chaos being, so I didn't really like the dichotomy of order versus chaos. I think that's in like every setting from back in the 70s. So Miminek in my game they represent the fallen angels, right? If high elves are angels or gods, then the Miminek are fallen versions of them, and that experience, when they start to experience emotion living in the world, that's where they get that dichotomy of order that they feel when the emotion comes in contact with their natural way of being. And I think like what causes that fall is probably maybe it's something the high elves do to them as they fall. And I thought it'd be really cool that they like literally fall, because not only do the high elves live in these, starship cities that fly around, the moon in the setting is literally a space base for the high elves that live in the moon. And I thought it'd be really cool if once somebody has fallen and they're exiling them, they're turning into a Miminek, that they kick them out of the moon and they literally fall to the planet. So that like an occasional occurrence might just be a Miminek falling from the sky and nobody really knows why. And I think perhaps there's a way for a Miminek to reascend into a high elf or to descend into a devil, right? So the Miminek is like the middle ground. It is the gray area between the high elves and the devils. Because like I said, the devils aren't born. The devils are just on a scale from high elf to devil, with Mimineks being in the middle, and they're just the same race mutated and transformed. And I was thinking it has something to do with morality. That's the obvious choice. So, if they make immoral decisions and they violate their purpose, then they have to go through the falling. I don't know, maybe that's what they call it. They have to go through the fall and then like re-earn their position among the high elves, or they can descend even further into demons. I thought, well, what are orcs then? Well, I think orcs are just the failure of the high elves to create humans. Like when their first experiments failed, they accidentally created orcs. And polders as well are like the gene splice between humans and dwarves. So orcs, polders, and humans are all created by high elves. And I think I haven't really decided where I land on this, but I do want a lot of the races to be able to turn into a revenant. Right here I have, they were what humans turn into because they have no god. This was like my earliest writing of it. So I've evolved a lot from here. And then the Time Raiders are basically like the world eaters. They fly around the timescape or whatever, and I came up with this idea that they literally trap worlds in time marbles. So what they have to do is they have to weaken the ley lines of the world, which is like the leftover energy from the god that created it. And once it's weak enough, then they can trap it in time. And then once they trap it in time, they can turn it into a marble. And then they use these time marbles to fuel their ships. So they're literally like fueling their ships off of worlds that they burn in like a time reactor. And I thought that was like a super cool like they are the world eaters. Not only do they like raid and pillage, but they raid and pillage to eventually just trap the whole world itself in time, and then basically make everyone inside, suffer as they extract energy from them to fuel their ships and maybe their guns and their armor and stuff. And so that's basically all the races. Or I guess we should call them ancestries. I still called them races for a long time when I was writing this. And so I turned it into like the people who normally live in town, the people who live out in the world kind of solitarily in like one spot, like the Hakan would like guard the ley lines points of convergence with the Titans, and the Wood Elves are probably like just trying to stay in their decaying forests and keep them from dying. The orcs gain mutations as they grow older. The only stable high elf creation was the human. That's where the humans are unique. The polders and the orcs both decay. The polders suffer the withering, the orcs suffer mutations. And so that it adds another complexity to playing one of those characters that I think is interesting, where you do have this looming threat that's not just death by aging, that you're gonna, even more so than like a human that wants to get out there before they die in their 100 years or whatever. I think orcs and polders have like 25 to like 50 years lifespan before they're going to be kaput. So they're pushed into action more that way. Another key part that wasn't here is that the dwarves seal the devils underneath the earth with runes, and that's going to be really important in the adventure. So that like the dwarves have taken it upon themselves that when a Miminek transforms into a devil, they are basically devil hunters. The dwarves are tasked, or at least the runesmiths, the anvil wardens, and the chain bearers are tasked with capturing them, chaining them, and binding them beneath the earth and kind of sealing them away, right? Because the earth itself can contain them with the right runes. And one of my players is playing a devil, so that'll be really interesting. Really interesting. And Let's see here. So I had like the basic setting. I went over like the world. It's an imperfect reflection of the God's divine creation. It's beautiful yet flawed, plagued with decay, rife with danger. The gods aren't really going to be active in the game. This is a game about people, not about gods or like the setting. The land is ancient. There's old wars fought from previous Time Raider attacks, so you can find old Time Raider weapons. Because I thought it'd be really cool that with those sci-fi weapons that you could get like a Halo energy sword or like an energy Gatling gun or something, and you just give that to the players. And I wanted to find like real life analogs for some of the ancestries, so I decided that the Time Raiders were like Aztecs do like blood sacrifices, and then the Aztecs are doing this like time marble sacrifice. But maybe their some of their guns and stuff would also take like blood sacrifices to power, so you could get like a cool Halo energy sword that like hurts you to do more damage. That was one I definitely wanted to put in the adventure eventually. To get the politics, I needed like a city that had like different factions. So I came up with Bastion and three factions: the Undying Throne, ruled by Vethadarex, the Revenant King, and his loyal Dragonites; the Gilded Quarter, governed by the wealthy and ambitious Gilded Council; and the Collective's Reach, dominated by a zealous cult that preaches divine truths. Now, how did I get here? Well, I thought of the three forms of major government: democracy, oligarchy, and like monarchy, or having an emperor. I was like, okay, well, not necessarily oligarchy, but being ruled by a council, right? So that's basically where I got these three districts of one city. And this is where like it sets up like it's a central tension, is that the city's currently going to be at peace, but it's on the brink of war, so it's kind of up to the players to be diplomats. But a lot of people are doing shady stuff, and they're not quite sure who's the shadiest one of everyone. So I have, Vethaderax as the emperor or the king. The Gilded Quarters run by a council of wealthy people, so it's kind of like a republic slash oligarchy. And then the Collective's Reach is democracy. They're a cult, but they're democratic cult, right? They're not necessarily evil. Like they view themselves as a church, right? Everyone views themselves as being the good guys. So, and these guys are actually the only ones that understand the creation myths and all of that. Nobody else really understands or cares about that sort of thing. Vethaderax is concerned with protecting Bastion at all costs, even if it means everyone fears him. So he does like public executions and lots of bad stuff like that. The Gilded Quarter, they run the economy, but they also pay like slave wages. Like they basically have production lines set up in their workshops. There's a good amount of ambiguity here on like who's like really bad. And I think that makes it more interesting. I got more stuff on the races here, and then like some more esoteric lore. One of the things I found out really hard when I was writing all this was like, what would be general common knowledge that all the players should know, and what is esoteric? What should I hide from the players? What is uncommon knowledge? And like delineating between those two things was actually like really hard. I was like, okay, I have no idea what would be interesting to have as obscure. And here's just more stuff on the races. And then I kind of ended up figuring out, oh, where do the races live? What districts are they most common in? And eventually I had to start getting into like actually writing the adventure. So I was like, okay, I have creation myth, I have a city, I have factions, we have like the basically everything we need, at least a rudimentary version, to start writing the adventure. But maybe this video is long enough already, so I'll probably go into the adventure on the next video, and we can end this one here and we can get into the actual adventure. By the way, I decided tentative name for the setting, Shards of Eternity, because all the gods die or like gone. They like battled, and then so they're like the eternity, and then the world is the shards of them, right? So Varith is just one of the worlds, and that's where the adventure is going to take place, is on Varith in the city of Bastion. So yeah, tune in for the next video, and I'll start going over the adventure on the Forging the Game series, and we'll see how well the series is received. I don't expect it would be a ton of viewership, but this is just kind of my thought process on how I started going over everything and writing, and trying to pull stuff together into something that feels like a dark fantasy with sci-fi elements world. I hope you enjoyed my ramblings. This video kind of turned out to be a little bit everywhere. I didn't really script it or anything. I was just really excited to splurge all of my exciting stuff I was doing, and which is why I haven't been posting a lot of videos lately. And I'm going to try to stay on track with this and keep everyone up to date and keep this kind of regular. And you guys can kind of see my thought process, and maybe you guys can pull some inspiration out of it for yourselves if you get writer's block like I often do. Feel free to check out the other content on the channel though if you're into video games. I got a lot of video game content. This is my first foray into tabletop, and it might be a slow road going, but it's really fun. I love writing, and it's my channel, so that's it. Kick rocks, watch another video. Peace.